Hi everyone, I'm Chad. Welcome to Maker's Bench. So tutorials are something that I want to do as well, and so this is going to be our first tutorial. It's in Fusion 360 and we're going to talk about parameters. And parameters are they're really a cool thing. I mean, the essence of parametric modeling is the fact that you use parameters instead of dimensions. It makes your models a lot more flexible, and it really allows you to drive those models with those parameters. So I'm going to explain a lot more about that in the tutorial. So here you go. Enjoy. Well, let's get started. First thing I want to talk about is Fusion 360 a little bit. So Fusion 360 is it's a 3D modeling software. It's made by Autodesk. Autodesk also makes AutoCAD, Inventor. It makes Revit for the architectural world. It makes quite a few CAD programs. They make quite a few CAD programs. So the nice thing about Fusion is that it's a very robust 3D solid modeler, and you can get a free hobbyist license. So it's great for 3D printing, because anybody who's got a 3D printer can download this and use their hobbyist license to use it for free. So when 3D printing, one of the first things I want to talk about is preferences. So if you go into where you're logged in, if you go into your preferences tab, there's going to be an option, and this is this default modeling orientation right here. Normally it's set to Y up, and if you set this to Z up, what that will do is that'll orient it so that when you bring your parts into a 3D printer, the Z-axis is going up, so you won't have to flip your part and that type of thing. So just wanted to cover that real quick. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change my units to metric. So I typically have my units in inches, but I'm going to do this project in metric. So over in your browser over here, there's a spot for units. You click on that little icon and it'll bring up your units, and you can change that to millimeter. And that's what I'm doing. So I just changed that to millimeter. One of the things that I want to talk about first of all is parametric modeling. And one of the things that parametric modeling does is, what it is it's the use of parameters in your model. So we can all put dimensions in like 12 or 14 or whatever. But with parameters, you can actually create a parameter that is length, and you can set that to be 12. Well, later on, you can use that to drive your models by going back to your parameters and changing your length. And instead of dimensioning something to 12, you dimension it to length, and you use the parameter instead of the physical dimension. Then all you have to do is go back to your parameters window. You can change your parameters whenever you want, and your model will adjust automatically if it's modeled correctly. And that's kind of what I want to show, is how to use parameters. So the parameters window is located in the Modify tab. Way down here at the bottom it says Change Parameters. And I use this window all the time. And so one of the things about this toolbar is there's not a lot of stuff up here, and hitting the drop down and coming down all the time is kind of a pain. But I want to point out that there's this little arrow button here. It says Add to Toolbar. So if I click on that, it's going to put the Change Parameters button in my toolbar. So now I can just click on my button up there and my parameters window comes up. So I'm going to start adding some parameters. This project that I'm working on is going to be everybody's favorite right now, fidget spinners. And the reason I'm going to use a fidget spinner is simply that it's an easy thing to make as a 3D model, but I can show you the concepts of the modeling as I go along, and you can take these concepts and apply them to whatever project you're working on. So that's really what the point of this tutorial is I'm trying to show parameters. Another reason I'm going to do fidget spinners is because I watch a lot of YouTube videos on 3D printing, and Joel over at the 3D Printing Nerd has challenged us to make fidget spinners. So I decided to go ahead and make a fidget spinner tutorial, and just to do my own version of a fidget spinner. So that's what I'm going to get to doing here now. So I'm going to start adding some parameters, and the first parameter I'm going to enter here is I'm going to put in my bearing diameter. Now I don't know what size bearing. I don't have bearings yet. I'm going to use ball bearings for my weights. I don't have any of that stuff yet, but I'm going to make a part for those. And that's the beauty of parameters. I can set this right now to be a 22 millimeter diameter bearing, and I don't even have to know. I can change it later, so I don't care what I've ordered or what I'm going to order. I can make it whatever I want. So we have bearing diameter. I'm going to go with another one called body width, and this is going to be the distance, kind of the material that's around the bearing, and I'm going to make that 3. I'm going to add, oops, I just accidentally clicked on a delete. And if you notice, they don't have a confirmation for that, so be careful. I don't believe I just did that, but there we go. Now we're going to add ball diameter for the ball bearing. That's going to be 8. Next, I'm going to do ball body width. That's going to be the material around the ball bearing. And the reason I'm making this a different width than the other one is that I can independently change them if I want. They are going to be the same right now, but I can change them later. And that's the point with parameters, is that you can always change them later. So, arm length. And I'm going to make that 30. I'm going to do an arm radius. Make that 18. Obviously, I've thought a little bit about what I'm going to do here, so I'm going to make this arm quantity. I've thought about this a little bit, so I kind of have a list of parameters that I want to make already. And for arm quantity is going to be a number of things. How many arms I'm going to have on my fidget spinner. So instead of having it be an actual measure, I'm going to give it no units. And right now I'm going to make it 3. And then we're going to have thickness. So this is the thickness of the actual fidget spinner. We're going to make it 7 millimeters. And we're going to do, now I'm going to get into some tolerances. And I've been doing this for a while, so I've kind of got my own way of naming parameters. I like to group them in certain ways or do them in a certain way. So I'm going to make a tolerance of 0.05. So the reason for the tolerances is when you get a bearing and it's 22 millimeters and you make a hole 22 millimeters, the bearing might be too tight in that hole. So we're going to put a tolerance on there so I can bump the size of that hole up a little bit if I want, and I can just make a tolerance number, and that way I know how much bigger I am than the hole at all times, and it'll because I'm not going to get it right the first time. I know that. I'm going to make another one called ball. That's also going to be 0.05. I'm just starting with a number right now, and then I'm going to make I'm going to make another one. It's going to be for a chamfer. I use CMFR for chamfers, and I'm going to call that ball. I'm going to make it 2 millimeters for now. And I'm going to make a fillet for the body. And it's going to be 3 millimeters. Alright, so I can always come back later and add more parameters. I don't have to just stick with these. I can add more as we go. So we've got our parameters made, and I'm going to get into just drawing this part up. And I'm going to draw the part. So I'm going to go down to circle, and I'm going to try to use the drop downs as much as I can. If you look next to a certain function, or a command, you're going to see that some are going to have a letter next to it, and that's the keyboard shortcut for that command. So for a center diameter circle, I could use the button key, the C button on my keyboard for a shortcut. I'm going to select a plane, and I'm then going to grab the center of that area and drag out a circle. Alright, I'm going to right click and hit OK because I'm done with that. That's the circle. Actually, I'm going to draw out a second circle. I should have kept that going, but draw out a second circle. So we have 2 circles. Alright, and the first circle is going to be that hole for the bearing. Alright, now it came in as I drew it out at 62, whatever. So I want it to be the bearing diameter. But I also want to add that tolerance in there. So the nice thing about all of these parameters is I can add the bearing tolerance. I just pull up the B, and I have my list here of all my parameters when you start typing in stuff. So tolerance bearing. Alright, I hit enter, and you're going to see that I got a 22.05 millimeter hole, and that's adding that tolerance there. And now I'm going to draw another dimension. Oh, you know what? I am doing nothing but going to that D, because it's such a habit for me to hit D for sketch dimension is D, right? So here's the sketch dimension. I always hit D, and I shouldn't always. I'm trying to use the menu. So I'm going to hit the second circle here so that it's just the dimension between the circles, and I want that to be the bearing body. Let's see, that's ball bearing. Let's see. oh, body width, I didn't call it bearing, I called it body width. So body width, and that's what I want that to be. I want that to be 3 millimeters. So if I zoom in, you can see that this is 3 millimeters. Now if I come back to my parameters, just to show you how this works, let's try to find a good place for this. Well, let me just move this over. Alright, we'll move that right there. If I change my bearing diameter to 24, you're going to see that that circle followed with it, right? If I come back to 22, that's great. If I change my body width to 6, it's going to change there. And so that's what the beauty of the parameter, basically that's how parameters work. I can go back in and just tweak those dimensions and everything moves. And now we're going to create and we're going to do an extrude. And as you can see, the keyboard shortcut for extrude is E. And I'm just going to click on this outer circle. I'm just going to grab the arrow and start lifting up. And it went up 5 millimeters, but I want it to be thickness. So I'm just going to type in TH and I get thickness. Now I hit enter. So, and even while it's a solid part now, I can come in here and I can change this to 12. And my circle, my body is going to change to what the whole size is changing to whatever I want, and everything's moving with it. So I'm driving a model that way with those parameters, and that's really one of the very powerful aspects of parametric modeling, is that you can go in and tweak those parameters. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a plane that is in the middle of this part so that I can have a centered, because I'm going to create a ball bearing out here. I'm going to actually create the ball bearing that's going to be my weight on the end of the arm, and I'm going to design my thing around that ball. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my origin, and I'm going to turn my origin stuff on so that I can see my planes. Up here on the construct tab, if you drop down, there's a offset plane option, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a new plane, but I'm going to grab this plane and I'm going to lift it up. Now as I lift it up, I see that I'm going up 4 millimeters, and so it's a positive number as I'm coming up. Sometimes when you get planes offset from certain areas, you don't always know if it's going to be a negative number or a positive number to get the part to move the way you want it to. And that's why I grab the arrow and drag, is so that I can see, like if I drug it the other way, you'd see the number went negative. Well, then I would know that I want it to be a negative number. So I use this arrow just to get it kind of started to see if I'm going positive or negative, and it's just a little visual way of me knowing. So now I know that that's what it is. Now I have a thickness, and I want this plane to always be in the center of this part. So I'm just going to type in thickness, and I'm going to do a divided by 2 and hit enter. Now this plane is right there in the middle. Okay, if I go to my parameters and I make my thickness 12, you're going to see that that plane has moved as well. So again, those parameters are very powerful. I'm going to turn the origin planes back off with that light bulb, and everything's turned off except that plane that I want to work on now. So I'm going to click on this plane. Actually, I'm going to create a sketch, and I'm going to click on that plane. So now I'm on that center plane halfway up, and I want to create that ball bearing. And so I'm going to draw a line first of all, and I'm going to put it over here. I'm not even going to worry about what size it is. And then I'm going to use an arc, and I'm going to use a 3-point arc. And I'm going to grab this circle, that point, I'm just going to drag it out. I'm going to make a little arc. Now obviously I want a half round, and what I want to talk about next is constraints. And over here in the sketch palette, you can see that there are constraints. And these down here are the constraints. So you got constraints, and you got coincident, collinear. So coincident is just 2 parts that touch, like a point to a line, or 2 points. Collinear is just that, it's 2 lines that you want to be in the same line. Concentric is circles, midpoint. There's a fix. I try not to use fixed points unless it's, well, I'll get into that on another video sometime, but parallel, you want 2 lines to be parallel, perpendicular, horizontal and vertical. Now when I drew this line, it was so close to being vertical that it assumed that it wanted it to be vertical, so it automatically applied this vertical constraint, which is fine. I'm going to leave it there. But if it wasn't there, I could add a vertical constraint to make sure that that line is always straight up and down. You get your tangent. There's a smooth constraint, an equal constraint. If you want 2 lines to be equal, you can make them equal. And then there's a symmetry constraint. Just a little list of all of the constraints. So in order to make a half circle, the first thing I want to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to use the dimension tool again, and I'm going to, first of all, I want this to be, wow, it's 8 millimeters, exactly what I was going to make that ball, but this is obviously the diameter of what I want that ball to be. So I'm just going to make this ball diameter and hit enter, and it's 8 millimeters. Now this half round, I want that, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a coincident constraint, and I'm going to take the center point of that circle and I'm going to make it coincident with this line. And that's all there is to it. I now have a half a circle. Now if I take this line and I drag it, you can see that this guy moves around, right? It's not locked into place. And I want this circle to be right here on the center of here, and I want it to be the arm length to be from the center here to the center of this ball bearing. So one thing that I really love doing, and it's a nice little trick, I grab a line and I'm going to make a line, all right? And I'm going to right click on this line and I'm going to make it a normal construction line. And so what I've done is I've made it a construction line. It turns to a yellow dashed line. I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut D for dimension, and I'm going to click on the line and just drag it out, and I'm going to make that arm length. So arm length. So now I have a point up here that's a construction line. So the construction line, if you try to extrude things, it won't use a construction line as a boundary. It's just a construction line. So I can lock things in with that. And I'm going to use another coincident constraint, and I'm going to put a point to here, and now my half a circle is locked into place. It cannot move. And I found that one of the things that makes life really, really easy is using the least amount of dimensions as possible. And so using constraints as much as possible wherever you can eliminates the need for using dimensions. And the less dimensions you can have in a drawing and in a model, the better off you are. So I'm done with that sketch for now, so I'm going to hit stop sketch, and I'm going to rotate this guy, and I'm going to zoom in here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create, and I'm going to go to the revolve button, and I'm going to create a revolve. And I'm going to click on my shape there, and then I'm going to select my axis, which can be this construction line, and I've got a ball, right? So there's my ball bearing. Now it's going to make that a new body, and when I make that a new body, it creates in my bodies, I have body 1 and body 2, all right? So if I turn off body 2, that ball disappears. But I still have my body here. So there's my, there's my part that I've got going on, right? So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to draw my part for my arm, and I want to get that arm drawn. And so I'm going to create a new sketch, and I want this new sketch to be back on the bottom because it's going to be the thickness of that part again. And I'm going to zoom down this way a little bit, pan that down, and I lost it. There we go, straight on. I like drawing straight on. And I'm going to draw a circle, and now I can put this circle right on this point again, or whatever, and it will lock onto that center point. And so I can draw a circle, and so I've drawn my circle. I want to have this edge of this circle as part of my sketch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to sketch, I'm going to come down to project, and what project does is project will project a line onto your sketch. So it's taking that arc and it's making a line out of it. And so if I rotate around on my sketch, down here you can see that there's a line there, and that it projected a line from that circle, so that I now have that circle as part of my sketch. And I'm going to go and I'm going to draw a couple more arcs. I'm going to use that 3-point arc again, and I'm going to start here, I'm going to go over to here, and I'm just going to draw an arc. I'm going to do the same thing over here, different places basically, but I've got 2 arcs. And now I'm going to use tangent constraints, and I'm going to say that this arc is tangent with that arc, this arc is tangent with this arc, this is tangent to here, and this is tangent to here. Okay, I'm done with tangents. Now I'm going to create a coincident constraint, and I want this point to be coincident with that circle. I want this point coincident with that circle, this point on this circle, and this point on this circle. Okay, so now the only thing that's different is, now I notice my center point isn't locked in with a center point there. Okay, so what I can do is I can go back and I can go to my sketches, and I can turn my sketch on that I created for my ball bearing, right? And I'm going to go back to project, and I'm going to project this same point, or that line, and I projected that line, and I can turn this sketch back off, and now I've got another construction line. Basically it's projected, but I've got this line that's in there. I'm also going to turn off the ball bearing so you can see that there's a point up there, and I'm going to create a coincident constraint between this point and the end of that. Where did that go? Well, it was there a second. Let me try to project that again. Maybe it didn't project. Maybe I can project the point. Oh, there it goes. Okay. I don't know if that did it either. Yeah, it did. Should have. Let's see. Okay. So there. That's projected onto there. I can also, that line I projected, I think I have to turn it to a construction line again, but there it is. Okay. I'm still getting used to Fusion. I'm really an inventor guy, so a lot of these commands are the same between both programs. They just work just a little bit different, so I'm having a little bit of a, sometimes I do things I expect them to work a certain way and they don't. I just got to play with it a little bit. But and then I'm going to use that dimension shortcut again, D on the keyboard to get dimension. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that out here, and I'm going to have arm radius. That was that 18 millimeter dimension I created earlier. I'm going to do this on both sides. And we've got our arm radius. So now, and then the only thing I have left is, I believe, if I drag on this circle, yeah, that circle will change sizes. So I'm going to put a dimension here, and that dimension is a diameter across. And so what I want that to be is I want that to be ball diameter, but I also want it to be that body width, right? So I'm going to add, and I'm going to put this in parentheses because I'm going to do some multiplication, and like algebra, you know, it does what's in the parentheses first and then does the rest. So parentheses, and I'm going to say ball body width, and I'm going to say times 2 and put another parentheses there, and now I've got that, and that makes it 14. So I've got 8 as my ball diameter. I had a 3 millimeter body width, so that's 2 of them, one, you know, around each side. So that's 6. So 6 plus 8 is 14. And so that gives me that. Now this thing is all locked in. Nothing can move. I can't drag anything around. Everything is locked in. I'm going to stop my sketch. I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to extrude. And I'm going to start selecting the parts I want to extrude. And there they are. I'm going to grab that and bring it up. And I'm going to say thickness again. All right. So there's my body. Now one thing that I can do is I'm going to turn this ball back on, and you can see this ball kind of sticks up a little bit there and a little bit there. And what I want to do is I want to use that ball. I need to cut that ball basically out of my arm. So I'm going to go to modify, and I'm going to click the combine tool, and I'm going to select the target body. So this is the body I want to carve some material out of, and my tool body is that ball. All right, and I don't want it to be a join. I want it to be a cut. I want to remove that material from the main spinner body itself, and I'm going to keep the tools. All right, I don't want it to delete the ball. I just want it to leave it there. So I hit OK. And now, when I turn the body off on the ball bearing, you're going to see that you can see inside there that it's carved out that ball. All right, and that's where I want my ball bearing to go. So the next piece of this is a chamfer. I'm going to put a chamfer on these circles so that I can get that chamfer going. So I'm going to go to modify, and I'm going to go to chamfer, and I'm going to select the circle here on that hole and the circle on that one. And I'm going to, for distance, I'm going to say CM, I got my chamfer, There it is. And I'm going to hit enter. And you're going to see that I now have this this chamfer right there. And now one of the things I want to do, and I'll explain it here in a second, I'm going to do another one of those plane offsets. And I'm going to turn my planes on. And I'm going to grab my offset plane, and I'm going to drag this plane up. I'm going to that one, and I'm going to drag that plane up this way. I see that it's 16. I'm going to say arm length. All right, enter. Okay. So I want to create a cross section through this spot right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to inspect, and I'm going to click on section analysis. And when I click on section analysis, I select a plane, and it cuts through the entire part right there. And I don't want to offset, I just want it to be 0. But so you can see here that basically when you look in, the ball bearing is going to be able to drop down through here, and what I want to do is I want that ball to sit there, and I want to be able to take a, tap it down and have it snap into these curved areas, and these curved areas are what's going to hold that ball bearing in place. So my chamfer size directly affects how big that is, right? So I'm just going to rotate this out a little bit. All right, and I'm going to take a look at that, and I want to say that chamfer is, right now it's 2. Well, if I make that chamfer 2.5, you're going to see that it makes it a much more, and you can see the other portion of this is I can turn on that ball bearing, so you can see that ball bearing, and you can see how much I'm going to have to actually have it, push around. And so maybe I want to make it 3. Okay, I'm going to start with that. I'm going to start with that. Let's say that's what we're going to use. I'm going to hit OK, and there is that. I want to turn this analysis off. That was a section analysis. I just turn that light off, and it turns back off, right? And I can turn this plane off as well. And if I want to look at that analysis again, I can always come back to it at any time. So that ball is there, all right? Now let's look at that ball again, and let's take a look. See, now when you cut a cross section, it's all one piece of material in the model, right? There, everything's touching, and I don't want that. So I'm turning this ball, I'm going to turn the ball off, and I've got this groove. I'm going to turn my analysis off. I've got this groove, and remember I created a tolerance, and I want that tolerance to be 0.05. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come to modify, and I'm going to do press pull. All right, and I'm going to grab this rounded surface where the ball is going to sit, and I'm going to grab that arrow, and I'm going to make it bigger. All right, now when I do that, see, there's my negative. That negative number comes into play. So I'm going to hit negative, and I'm going to say tolerance, and I'm going to say ball. All right, now it's 0.05 is what happened there, right? So if I come in here, and so which is hard to see, if I change this ball tolerance to, right here, let's say I change it to 1, you're going to see that that thing got bigger, right? If I change it to 0, it's back down to that 8. So I'm going to go 0.05, and you're going to see it got a little bit bigger, so the ball's going to snap in there. So now if I turn this analysis back on, and I turn my ball back on, I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to look, and you're going to see that there's a little space around that area, okay? If I come into my parameters, I'm going to bring the parameter box over here, and if I change that ball parameter to 0.07, you're going to see that that space got a little bit bigger. Okay, so I can tweak this after I start making parts. If it's too loose or whatever, I can make it a little tighter, all that type of stuff. So very, very powerful way to quickly be able, adjust and fix your stuff. So I'm going to turn that analysis off. I'm going to turn this ball back off, and now we're going to add a fillet to it. So I'm going to come down here to modify. I'm going to hit fillet. You can see there's an F shortcut for fillet, and I'm going to select this outside edge and this edge, and that's what I want the fillet to be. And so I'm going to say FLT and FLT body, and it grabs that and it does that. So it cut away a little of that top material, but that's okay. We've got a fillet. It's almost all the way around. I wanted there to be a little flat there on the side, so I didn't quite make it 3.5. If I'd have made it 3.5, we would have got it to be basically a half round all the way around. But so there's basically the basis of the fidget spinner. we're going to do a circular pattern. So I'm going to go to create. We're going to come down to the pattern tab and we're going to find the circular pattern. So to do a pattern, we're going to make sure that it's not on faces. We want to make sure that we're on bodies because we're going to do the whole body. So we select the body, and that is the object. And then we're going to select an axis. Now, I could select the circle. I really don't like doing circles and faces and stuff for my patterns things. It's just years of practice and experience. Using origin planes or using work axes or something that's set up to actually be the center of whatever it is you're going to rotate around on a circular pattern is usually helpful. So every model that you set up and you start in Fusion is going to have it's actually going to have 7 points or 7 objects in this origin folder. There's the center point itself, and then you've got an x-axis, a y-axis, and a z-axis. You're also going to have an xy plane, you're going to have your xz plane, and you're going to have your yz plane. And I'm going to select the z-axis to be my pattern, rotate my center point of my axis for my circular pattern. We're going to go full, and we want 3 of them. Okay, so we're going to hit OK, and we've got 3 parts. Now what happens when it does this, and this is one of the things I don't really care for so much in Fusion, is that it rotated those parts, but it made 2 more solid bodies. It didn't. I wish there was an option that you could do a join right there, so that it becomes, or a combine, so that this whole thing becomes. You combine the parts that you rotated around and to one part. So we're going to have to do a combine command here separately. But again, oops, you know what I didn't do? If I go back to my edit feature, I just left the quantity at 3. And what I want to do is I want this to be the arm quantity. Alright, so arm quantity is 3. Now I can go back to my parameters, and if I want to change the arm quantity to, say, 5, did I just do that right? Arm quantity 5. Alright. So thinking. Edit feature. Okay, well, I don't know what's going on here. Edit feature. Oh, it's back to 3. Arm quantity. Okay. Didn't take the first time. So now I can go back and I can change it to 3. As you can see, now you can change your arm quantity and you get whatever, how many parts you want. Hit OK. Now, again, we've got 2 separate bodies, and if I turn that body off, you're going to see that basically you've still got your same part and they're all separate bodies. So we have to do a combine command here. And we're going to do the combine, and we're going to select, again, we're going to do the target body as the main one, and then we're going to, tool bodies are going to be the 2 parts, or the whatever arms that you're going to be connecting. We are doing a join. This time we're going to unselect keep tools, and we're going to hit OK. And what happens now is it joined it all into one body. So if I turn that off, the whole thing turns off. So now we've got this one body here. The problem with this that I don't like, and the reason that I don't like it, is because if I come into my parameters now and I want to change this to being 5, I hit OK, I still get 5, but now I've got an extra body here and an extra body here, and then if I turn those off, this body is now, it's still one body, but it's moved, right? It's not quite the same. So then what I have to do is I have to come down to my combine, and I have to, well, first of all, I have to turn these bodies back on. I have to come down to my combine, and I have to edit that combine, edit that feature. I go to tool bodies, and I select these 2 parts. I hit OK, and now we've got one body again. All right. It's another step that you have to do, and that kind of defeats the purpose a little bit of parametric modeling, in my opinion. And so now if I want to change that back to 3, what's going to happen is I'm going to hit 3, I'm going to hit OK, and you can see I've got a yellow box around my combine. It's because there's an error there, type of thing. What do I have to do to fix it? Double click on it. Yep, I double click on it, and I get my target body, and I get my 2 selected. I hit OK, and now it's fine again. But it's something that I have to do. And you know, as you build a more complex part, this timeline down here is going to get longer and longer and longer. And so one of the things that you can do is I can right click on here and I can rename this. And I can call this my arm pattern, or my arm combine. It's not the pattern. Okay, so now I can rename the pattern itself, and I can call that the arm pattern. It's a good habit to name these things as you get more complex parts, because as I come through and I want to find, you know, once I've got more and more things done and I want to go back and I want to say, where was that piece I want to edit? It tells me that this is the arm combine. It also highlights up above, but this way I know exactly what it is. This is my arm pattern, this is my combine. So basically that's it for parametrics for now. Small taste of what parametrics can do for you and using parameters. There's some other things that we can do with parameters. For instance, if I wanted this radius, say I wanted the radius of this arm length to always be like if it was 15 and 30, that would make that kind of narrow. Okay, so let's say I want it to be half of my arm length at all times. I could say I want this to be arm length. I want it to be arm length divided by 2. I can do that right here. Okay, and I can use a mathematical equation up here, and you can see that the value is 15. Now if I change my arm length to, say, 28, it'll change, and then this changed to 14. So you can also use it, you know, to be mathematical equations and all kinds of stuff as in set up in those parameters instead of just using numbers and whatnot. So, and again, the least number of dimensions that you have that actually drive the part, the easier it is to understand and the easier it is to use. But you know, let's just go ahead and leave that there. All right. So there's my spinner. The ball bearing again is still here, and it's there. And so I'm going to end up with these ball bearings that snap in here, and a bearing that's going to snap in there. Now, you know, the nice thing here is if I want to change this bearing diameter to 26, if I get a big bearing, you know, we can change that bearing size. If I want to change the body width thing here to 2 millimeters, I can do that. That makes it a lot thinner, right? If I want to change this thickness to something else, 9, I can do that. And of course then I kind of wrecked that because now my ball is in the middle of that, so that's a little bit too thick, but you get the point. And so that is parameters, and there is my fidget spinner. Once I get my printer, hopefully I can get it printed. Well, I got the printer, I just got to get the hot end fixed. The hot end didn't work. If you've watched my powering it up video, you'll see that my hot end had an issue, so hopefully I'm getting that on Monday. Today is Saturday, so I should be getting it in 2 days. And I'm going to get that fixed, and we can try to start printing some stuff. So there's the tutorial. Hope you enjoyed it. Okay, well that wraps up the first tutorial that we've done now on parameters in Fusion 360. I hope you found it educational. I hope you learned something from it. I hope that you can take something that you learned from this tutorial and apply it to your own 3D models. So if you want to tell me what you thought of parameters in the comments below, that would be great. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to find out, you know, what you think of parameters and how the tutorial went for you overall. If you want to hit the subscribe button, that'd be fantastic too, and we'll see you next time.